They never tell you what it sounds like when a world is declared beyond redemption. There is no single alarm, no trumpet of judgment that rolls across the void. It begins quietly, with a data slate sealed by wax and sigil, carried by a faceless adept whose hands tremble, even as training forces them to remain steady. It begins with a phrase spoken in a chamber that smells of incense and old stone, a phrase so carefully worded that it leaves no room for appeal. Excommunicate traitorous perdita, unsalvageable. And from that moment on, an entire planet becomes a memory waiting to be erased. Picture the world at that exact instant, though no one there yet knows it. The manufactorum sirens still howl at shift change. Prometheum fires still gutter beneath cathedral-sized furnaces. Children still run along hablock corridors, chasing scraps of light leaking from lumen strips. The Imperium does not announce its final judgments to the condemned. Mercy in this case is ignorance. Life continues for a few more hours or days or weeks, unaware that it has already been weighed, measured, and found wanting. If you find yourself drawn to these moments at the edge of Imperial mercy, then walk with me a little longer. Share this account with others who listen for the echoes of lost worlds, and mark this channel so you do not miss the next transmission. From the dark between the stars. Knowledge, even forbidden knowledge, survives only when it is carried forward. The order itself is transmitted through layers of bureaucracy so dense that no single soul can claim responsibility. Segmentum command passes it to sector authorities, who pass it to the relevant battle fleet, who pass it to the admirals and lord captains tasked with execution. Each step is accompanied by ritual disclaimers and purity seals, as though parchment and prayer might dilute the weight of what is being done. By the time the fleet translates into the doomed system, the decision feels less like a choice and more like gravity, inevitable, impersonal, absolute. The reasons a world reaches this point are many, but the outcome is always the same. Sometimes it is heresy that has rotted too deeply. Generations of cult worship, hidden behind the imperial aquila until the truth finally claws its way into the open. Sometimes it is Xenos contamination, an orc infestation that has spread beyond all hope of containment, or a Necron tomb complex whose awakening poisons the planet at every level of reality. Sometimes it is worse than either, a demonic incursion that has torn the veil thin and made the soil, itself a gateway for things that should never walk beneath the sun. I have read after-action reports where entire populations were judged irretrievable not because they welcomed damnation, but because they endured it too long. Survival in these cases becomes a kind of guilt, a world that adapts to horror, that normalizes the presence of warp-spawned abominations or alien overlords, ceases to be a loyal world, even if its people still pray to the Emperor with cracked lips and bleeding knees. Faith alone does not cleanse a planet that has learned to live with the unclean. When the Astra Militarum is involved, the first signs are subtle. Regiments arrive without banners unfurled, their colors muted beneath layers of ash and void dust. Orders are clipped, devoid of the usual promises of liberation or glory. There are no grand speeches about reclaiming the Emperor's domain. Instead, there are kill zones mapped with clinical precision, evacuation corridors that lead nowhere, and ammunition stockpiles far larger than what would be required for mere suppression. The soldiers feel it before they understand it. Veterans recognize the pattern and grow quiet. New recruits sense the tension and mistake it for fear of the enemy, never realizing it is fear of what they themselves are about to become. Civilians, when they notice anything at all, notice shortages first. Water rations tighten, foxcasts become erratic. The planetary governor, if one still exists, retreats from public view under the pretense of emergency councils and strategic planning. In truth, many governors learn of the sentence at the same time as the fleet arrives in orbit, and some collapse under the weight of it. A few attempt rebellion, deluding themselves into believing that defiance might buy time or force negotiation. None succeed. A world declared beyond redemption has already exhausted the Imperium's patience. Above it all, the battle fleet hangs like a ring of executioners' blades. From the surface, they are little more than stars that do not move correctly, cold points of light where familiar constellations should be. From the bridges of those ships, the planet fills entire viewports, blue and green or rust red and ochre, depending on what kind of world it once was. Admirals recite litanies of duty while servitors murmur targeting solutions in Binharic monotone. There is no hatred in these chambers, only resolve. Hatred would imply passion, and passion has no place here. Exterminatus is not a single weapon but a category, a spectrum of final solutions tailored to the nature of the contamination. Cyclonic torpedoes crack a world's crust and ignite its core, turning continents into drifting slag. Virus bombs strip all life down to its most basic components before atmospheric. Ignition scours the planet clean in firestorms that rage for days. In rarer cases, more arcane measures are taken, involving relics sealed away since the Great Crusade. Devices whose workings are understood only as ritual and whose consequences linger in the warp long after the physical world is gone. What is often forgotten is that these decisions are not made lightly, at least not by those close enough to see the cost. I have stood in a strategium where an inquisitor of the Ordo, Hereticus, argued against immediate exterminatus, not out of mercy, but out of hope that a fragment of the population might yet be salvaged. I have seen an Astartes chapter master stare at a hololithic projection of a dying hive city and remain silent for a full minute before giving his assent. Silence in those moments speaks louder than any speech. There are whispers always, among the lower decks and the pilgrim holds, about what happens to the souls of those left behind. Ecclesiarchal doctrine insists that the faithful are welcomed into the Emperor's light, their sacrifice noted and honored. Others, less certain, mutter that a world consumed by warp taint drags its dead screaming into the same abyss that claimed their bodies. No official answer is given. Faith, like ignorance, is sometimes treated as a kindness. On the surface, as the first weapons fall, confusion reigns. People look up, shielding their eyes from unnatural light, and for a heartbeat they believe rescue has come. Dropships, perhaps reinforcements, the Emperor's angels descending at last. Then the ground convulses and the sky itself seems to tear open. Sound becomes a physical force, a pressure that crushes lungs and shatters stone. The air tastes of metal and ozone. Those closest to the impact die instantly. Those farther away have just enough time to understand. Some worlds do not even receive that. Virus bombardment is silent at first, a fine mist drifting down like ash. It seeps into lungs and pores, dissolving flesh from the inside out. Entire cities collapse into heaps of liquefied organic matter, and then the fires begin. From orbit, it is beautiful in a terrible way. Storms of flame racing across continents, oceans boiling away beneath them. There is no cheering on the bridges of the fleet. Only observation, confirmation, and the slow turning away as the planet's status rune shifts from active to dead. Afterward, there is always a period of quiet. The fleet remains in system longer than strictly necessary, monitoring for anomalies, scanning for signs that something has survived when it should not have. The mechanicus dispatches Skitari and tech priests to nearby, void stations to recalibrate, instruments that have been strained by the energies unleashed. Astropaths report disturbances in the warp, echoes that fade only gradually. Some swear they hear voices during these days, faint and pleading, though no two accounts ever agree on the words. The Imperium records the event in ledgers that stretch back 10,000 years. A line is added. A seal is affixed. The world's name is struck from tithe rolls and star charts. Future generations may pass through the system without ever knowing that billions once lived and died there. This too is intentional. Memory can be a vector for corruption. Better to forget than to risk repeating the failure, and yet forgetting is never complete. Veterans carry it with them in the way they flinch at sudden light or fall silent when a certain hymn is sung. Inquisitors reference it obliquely in interrogations, using the threat of planetary annihilation as a reminder of imperial resolve. Preachers invoke it in sermons, describing fire and judgment in vivid terms meant to terrify as much as inspire. The ghost of the lost world lingers, shaping behavior long after its atoms have cooled. There are those who claim, quietly and without sanction, that the Emperor himself is aware of every such act, that through the Golden Throne and the Astronomicon, he perceives each extinguished world as a dimming of the galaxy's light. Others insist this is heretical sentimentality, that the Emperor's will is expressed precisely through these acts of annihilation, that to hesitate would be the true betrayal. These debates never leave sealed chambers and private confessions. Officially, there is no conflict. There is only duty. Perhaps the most unsettling aspect is how routine it all becomes. For the Imperium, 1,000,000 worlds is a resource to be managed, not a collection of unique cultures and lives. Lose one and the balance barely shifts. This scale is necessary for survival, or so the logic goes. To care too deeply about any single planet would be to invite paralysis. And yet occasionally someone does care. An admiral delays an order by minutes. An inquisitor files an appeal that has no chance of success. A guardsman writes a final letter for a family that will never receive it. These gestures change nothing. They matter anyway. In the end, the grim reality of worlds declared beyond redemption is not just that they die, but that they die alone. Their fate sealed long before the first shot is fired. They are not cautionary tales told in full, nor martyrs celebrated with statues and holidays. They are excised, cauterized wounds in the body of the Imperium, spoken of only when absolutely necessary. The galaxy rolls on indifferent, hostile and vast, and somewhere in the dark, another data slate is already being prepared. Its wax seal waiting to cool, its words waiting to condemn an entire world that, for a little while longer, still believes it has a future.